Reconstructionist conversions as well as Orthodox conversions, both modern Orthodox and traditional Orthodox conversions. Do you have any reaction?
Yeah, not really. I don't think it's a big deal. If you want to analyze it, we look at it from a few different angles. One is just how many people is that? Is it even 10,000? And so, I mean, it could be something, but it's probably a bone to liberal Jews in terms of Israel's going to need support in the Biden administration. Biden's going to probably do a lot of things um, not as favorable to Israel as the Trump administration. And obviously, um, Israel wants to extend an arm to the majority liberal, secular American Jews in the Democratic Party. And this is one way to do it. How good will be at doing it? Um, Really, it's probably only an olive branch to like head of Jewish organizations. The only like Jews that you would imagine, or like Gentiles that would have converted Reform or conservative that would seriously be considering moving to Israel would probably be people that were extremely involved in Judaism, that they would be enough involved to be involved in Israel. So that could be enough that Israel is kind of just like, God forbid, will recognize your shiksa wives if you toe the hard line on Israel despite all the pressures. So I don't know if you agree with the first major premise I'm doing here.
I haven't formed an opinion yet. I need to know how many people this is going to affect.
I mean, you agree it's not that many. I mean, Orthodox. You said there's only like what do you say, like 200 Orthodox converts a year in America?
Yeah, and it turned out I was wrong about that. I think it's something closer to 1,000.
1,000 Orthodox
Yeah,
converts in America, and you think the Reform and Conservative are pumping them out in mass like it's 5,000 a year,
I
or you
don't
think
know. I just don't know. So obviously, most of the ones that Reform and Conservative convert in the U.S., they're not going to want to move to Israel anyway. So I would need to know more about what kind of real world effects this will have on Israel before I form an opinion.
even the Orthodox in how many of the Orthodox converts to Judaism in America moved to Israel? Probably less than 10%, maybe even significantly less than 10%. I'm not exactly sure, but and even if you did move to Israel, that you would probably want to keep your U.S. citizenship. It's more valuable economically on a global scene than Israeli citizenship. So that so if you're looking at like, crap, America's on the decline. I'm going to have to look for new future, new option for myself. Israel seems a pretty good option. Orthodox conversion is just too difficult, and especially now in turbulent times where American support of Israel could be quite crucial, and American Jews, could be looking at it like, why should I really support, Israel? Like I might not even, the right of return. They might cancel it on me. Like like I might have non-Jewish family that there's no way. Like even Luke Ford and Duvid, arguably don't cut the line for an Orthodox conversion. I was saying, like, I mean, Luke has his rabbis, and I'm saying like the right, he probably wouldn't have any problem the right in return, but I'm saying still that there's sizable chunks of the Jewish community who would have no problem questioning mine or Luke's Judaism, that's like, wow, why should I take all this heat for supporting Israel when they probably don't even really consider me a Jew? And then so you say like legally, okay, like you go out on the line to support Israel and you lose all your friends and blow your chance in American society. You have the right of return. You can move to Israel. You don't need the rabbi's permission. You don't need like people to like you or whatever. It's like an ethnic or religious thing that it's your right. Um, Although tying it to a conversion of like a reform or conservative rabbi, so it's like if you're good with the reform rabbi, you could move to Israel, and it's kind of corruption based. You would think like Israel, maybe they could come up with a more objective measure than than like some letter of recommendation by a rabbi, because at the end of the day, the conversion Orthodox to Reform is going to be some rabbi vouching for the person, as opposed to possibly like an objective measure of practice or knowledge or something of Judaism, that you would think that possibly Israel as a modern nation would move in that direction, but saying like no. So like it used to be like, okay, like you could go to the Reform shul and it might be fun, but it's not going to get you to Israel. Now I'm saying no, it could get you to Israel. And then you also have the problem is the internal politics in Israel. The right of return is only half of the picture, like because you don't have to be a Jew to have the right of return. Like, there's other categories, like descendants of Holocaust survivors, people who have patrilineal descent, also have the right of return. Though the rabbis in Israel who determine the religion uh, don't deem them as Jews, so likely that you could have the right of return and you could go to Israel, and then the rabbis there will not recognize you as a Jew, and that will have legal implications for marriage, um, possibly burial, maybe army service, other things in Israel that so the right of return is only um, part of the picture. And like we've mentioned with Luke multiple times, it's possible that the rabbis in different parts of Israel would accept or reject Luke's conversion. There would certainly be large percents of Israel, probably, like the majority, 50, 60, 70% of towns in Israel, the rabbis there would probably largely accept his conversion, but there would be places where they probably wouldn't. And because Israel's somewhat democratic in that matter, it's been ruled that it's a community's choice to accept or reject converts. That you can't say like, "Oh, my rabbi accepted me as a convert, therefore all Jews must accept me." Then Israel, they've also ruled that like, no, I mean, communities have the right on their own to say like, we don't want any converts. So there's a lot of interesting um, dynamics. So I'm putting it as kind of a bone being thrown out to liberal Jews in order to get the Jewish organizations like the ADL, APAC, and these various players in the Jewish community, where it's probably an issue because a lot of these people probably have non-Jewish family, kids married non-Jewish spouses. In the end of the day, Orthodox conversion is extremely difficult. It's near impossible. Saying like objectively Orthodox conversion is almost near impossible. And so, just to lower the bar on that standards, the heads of these Jewish organizations, like, you can breathe a sigh of like, whew, at least my, half Jewish kid with the Reform conversion will be able to make it to Israel now.
And a ton of converts to Judaism are quite insecure about their conversion. And so when you are insecure about your conversion, people will pick up on it, and then they'll start saying, "Hey, I don't accept your conversion." I mean, you're providing an opportunity for people to hammer on you and to try to find your weak points. But if you want an easy life, I don't recommend converting to Judaism. So you will be challenged, and the Jewish way of life is a competitive way of life. You don't just get to march in, and they don't necessarily always welcome converts the same way that Christians do. Now, David, many non-Jews find it incomprehensible that someone can convert to Judaism, and they go, "Oh, okay, maybe you can do it in theory, and maybe you can get through some kind of bureaucratic process, but real Jews are not going to accept you." What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my research, and I call the Israeli heretical scholars who are, let's say, objectively examining the archaeological, the canonical record of the various sources in trying to make a historically objective decision of what went on, seem to agree that conversion in the biblical world didn't exist. If you were like a half Jew, in a lot of circumstances you became a Jew. In other circumstances, you were considered just a non-Jew, even if the person was a half Jew, and there was no real method to join the Jewish people besides through intermarriage, which was discouraged. Although if it happened, the person would offspring would become Jews. And then in the Roman or Greek period, that the rabbis instituted a conversion process largely due to political reasons, that Jews were self-autonomous, and after overthrowing the Greeks in the Hanukkah story, that we had to govern, and then when we were Jews governing over non-Jews, we needed to create a conversion process. So that's the generally accepted understanding of the history according to most secular scholars. And so that your average Jew would reject that there's such a thing as conversion would be a support to that fact. So like when Philip Daniel says that, like, I don't think Luke's a real Jew, like he's saying because like conversion was made up by the rabbis anyways. You can't really convert and become a Jew. Everyone knows that was just made up by the rabbis. And so there could be a certain element to it. So if you're Orthodox Jew, you believe that there's an oral tradition, and the rabbis and sages of the generation aren't the prophets. So there's the descending generation that belief that each generation is descending in terms of righteousness and holiness. But the sages of the generations are basically the deciders of Jewish law, and there's a system of halacha. And even Luke Ford, who's not a scholar in Aramaic or Hebrew, could pick up the halakhic process and understand how a Jew decides what to do or what not to do, as opposed to even Babs, just people who are Jews by blood, who don't know much about the rabbis or the books, and have just this like, you can't just become a Jew, you can't convert, no, you rabbi can't, that's all nonsense any way you do it. Or they say basically you could convert, but you only become a Jew when you marry a Jew. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who does it. If it's a Haredi rabbi to a reconstruction of rabbi, Luke Ford nabs a Jewish woman and has a half Jewish kid. His half Jewish kid is going to be considered Jewish, no matter what denomination the rabbi who oversees does it. So that would be my scholarly overview. And so obviously as a believer, saying like, no, I mean, there's like a soul type thing, and if you convert Orthodox, like, you gain that Jewish soul, and if the conversion wasn't valid, like, you didn't, like, it's a question, did you actually get the soul or not? Because there's a fundamental difference between a Jew and a non-Jew, and there might be a race ethnic thing, but there's a soul factor. And if your father's a Jew and your mother's a non-Jew, you don't get that Jewish soul. And if your mother's a Jew and your father's a non-Jew, you do get that Jewish soul. And if you're a convert, you get that Jewish soul. And so you have to look at the rationalist perspective that might bear in mind that Luke Ford converted Orthodox, but I'm sure he could comprehend what the secular scholars how they view the history and the conversion of Orthodox, and even understand that a sizable chunk of Jews just are going to reject that there's such a thing as conversion, period. Plus he could have his personal connection to God in the rituals, in the mitzvah, in the belief that yes, he does have this Jewish soul, and when he does those mitzvahs and commandments, it's the exact same as when any other Jew does it, because through the conversion process he has became a full Jew.
Now, just looking empirically in my life experience, probably a majority of converts to Judaism, and I'm talking here Orthodox converts to Orthodox Judaism, I'd say a majority of them have assimilated into the community, but to varying degrees. And whether or not you get married is absolutely key. So pretty much all converts to Orthodox Judaism I know of who are married, they fit in with the community. And converts to Orthodox Judaism who don't marry, they have a much more difficult time. But that's also true for Jews who are born Jewish. If you're in an Orthodox Jewish community and you don't get married, then you're an outlier and a freak. So what have you noticed about socially fitting in? What's the range for converts to Orthodox Judaism fitting in with their Orthodox Jewish community?
It's always going to be a split. There's always going to be people skeptical of converts within the community. There's always going to be a handful of people that are extra nice and careful to be accommodating to converts. But I would say if you get married, even to another convert, and you get your children into the Jewish private schools, your kids will intermarry with Jews. There might be some sort of like caste type hierarchical besides the obvious like halacha and like marrying a Cohen or something, but there's going to be obvious discrimination or hierarchical things. But like, yeah, if you could maintain whatever standard is necessary to keep your kids in the Jewish school, your kids will basically be fully assimilated, even though there'll be some obvious discrimination of everyone will know that they're a kid of a convert. And certain like rabbis are usually an inherited position, and a lot of things in Jewish organizations are rising to power, that a kid of a convert will see that like it's much more difficult for him to become the head of one of these organizations or to become a rabbi or something like that. And there could be not just discrimination, just like obvious reasons that it's difficult in having like especially a Jewish like ethnic community where most of the leaders of Jewish organizations are also kind of people from really large families who have like hundreds of cousins in the community. So even if Luke Ford marries and his kids are acclimated, um, and even get married to someone in the Jewish community, they're still not going to have hundreds of cousins all around the community in every synagogue in the same way that the Jews that have risen to power, or the families that have risen to prominence in Jewish organizations over the years. So in different communities, what it means to keep your kids in the system. So saying Luke right now to be like an accepted Jew, counted minyan, invited to Kiddush, versus if he was married with a wife, and what the community would require for his kids to go to their private schools. And that would depend. In LA, there's probably 30 different private schools, and they might have varying standards, but all of them, in order to have Luke's kid in their school, would assess some sort of behavior limit that, and that, I mean, WASPs and even Indians or whatever, there's a common thing, but they would assess some sort of behavior maximum that you can't really go beyond that point to keep your kids in the system. And like in LA, I would assume that that's probably pretty liberal, that you might even be able to like drive on Sabbath and keep your kids in the Orthodox system in LA.
Oh no, well, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm split. So, in a truly Orthodox community, you can't drive on Sabbath and be a part of it. The rabbi will have a talk with you, and you'll get a warning, and then you'll be out. But there are some community Orthodox Jewish communities in LA where many of the people who attend the synagogue are not Orthodox, and there are even some Orthodox Jewish day schools with much more relaxed standards. So generally speaking, in an Orthodox community, right, if you drive on Sabbath, you're out. I mean, you're considered.
No, I'm saying, but once you have a kid in the system, the rules change. So it's saying if you got married to another convert, and let's say you kept the rules basically for the next 10 years, you and your wife, and you have like an 8 and 6 year old kid in their schools already, and then you start driving on Sabbath, like that would be a different story. At that point, your kids are already in the system. Um, they would have to like, and I don't know how they would do it. The rabbis there would have to assess it. But I mean, you agree that would be a different situation if you had kids in their system. They would have to calculate that differently. That they like. So if you get away now, it's like okay, whatever, didn't work out, no big deal. But if you had kids, and your kids were part of the system and had been going to schools with the rest of the Jewish kids, they would make an attempt to keep your kids in the system, and they might become liberal and be like, okay, like he started driving on Sabbath, but everyone knows is like, but relative to the school, and I mean you see what I'm saying, that the calculation of what it means to keep your Judaism would change once you have kids in the system.
Yeah, I think one thing that that non-Jews often don't understand about Orthodox Judaism is how incredibly flexible it is. So there's definitely an impulse in Orthodox Judaism that anyone in the community who starts publicly driving on the Sabbath, there's certainly an impulse, and in many communities, you just immediately they'd be thrown out. But on the other hand, there are communities that take a more flexible approach. So some day schools, some Orthodox Jewish day schools in Los Angeles would boot a family, no questions asked, if the parents were driving on the Sabbath, and then other day schools and rabbis would have more nuanced approaches. So it's all over the map. So some communities very strict, some schools very strict. So there are Jewish day schools where if you go to a gym, that you are thrown out of the school. So if you go to a movie theater, you're thrown out of the school. If your home has a TV in it, you're thrown out of the school. So it depends on the day school. Even among Orthodoxy, there is a range of responses, and so you have the halakha, the law, but then you have the situation and the persons involved, the community, and say the people who are sinning, are they big donors, right? That will often play a role, or do they have a job with the Biden administration, right? So all these things come into play.
Well, and there's an understood comparing the convert to the way the rabbi expects the congregation to behave to the average behavior of the actual congregation. So it's saying like, you're not a real Jew, your conversion is invalid because you behave the same way as the people who you pray with. And you as a convert cannot get away with that. There might be a tendency to be like that, but and there could be an understanding where it's like, let's just say we keep the rules like this, even though we don't. But there is, people are smart and make decisions on what's best for the community, and so people convert to Judaism. You don't want to say like, especially Orthodox Judaism, which is really near impossible in terms, especially like for a man. You're saying like, just imagine getting up early to pray and like put on tefillin for an hour every day, or wearing tzitzis every day. It's just basically, to a certain extent, giving over a large portion of the rest of your life to, this pretty intense religious system that's extremely demanding of, almost all interactions and all aspects of the life, to, have an actual rabbi or board of rabbis that are going to verify that a person is upholding that standard. And those rabbis are also shepherds over a larger Jewish community that they know themselves that the vast majority, even in the Orthodox world, don't actually uphold that standard that they're trying to set for converts to enter. So as a big tent strategy, you're saying like, okay, like Luke, you've been very inspiring to a lot of Jewish people. You were nice to a lot of Jews. You have a lot of friends. And we understand that it's going to be near impossible for you to do all this stuff. So, we're going to cut you some slack. We're going to, expand the tent, and, you don't have to worry. You still got the right of return. Like, even if you have to start driving on Sabbath, even if you, can't even keep, to a certain extent, like, like we're going to expand the tent. And, so strategically that probably means Israel. I mean, you could look at it as just the Supreme Court. They made a decision. It came, and whatever, the Supreme Court's liberal, it was very likely they were going to decide this anyways. But as a greater strategy, just saying like, Luke, like Israel needs your help, and we can't afford to lose you just because you can't meet the minimum standards of what some people think an Orthodox conversion should be.
Now, there are various things that tend to trip people up when they make their conversion real and join an Orthodox Jewish community. So for many people, observance is incredibly challenging. And then for other people, it's living in such close-knit community. For other people, it's the competitive nature of Jewish life. It's everybody knowing your business. There are a lot of different things that can trip you up. Joining Orthodox Judaism is like joining a type of nationalism, in that pretty much in all forms of nationalism, you make the community the focus rather than the individual. And so for many people who are used to leading an individualist life, when they convert to Orthodox Judaism, it comes as a shock, because the individual is not the primary focus of Orthodox Judaism, it's the community. And so all the prayers are for the people as a whole, not for individuals. And the focus in the way Judaism operates is, what's best for the community. So you may confide in your rabbi, and you may think, oh, a rabbi is like a priest. He's going to keep my confidentiality. But if the rabbi believes it's in the interests of the community for more people to know whatever it is that you confided, he will put the good of the community ahead of what you thought was a private and confidential conversation. So, what are the things that you have seen challenge converts, particularly in living out their Yiddishkeit?
Um, Probably dealings with secular Jews, um, or just identity issues where maybe enough people don't know they're a convert, so they just start pretending they're not a convert, and then have identity issues, or long-term effects of knowing the language, really getting into Jewish culture, and then also the tendency of, if you're a convert and you're going to move Orthodox, and then there could be the walling off from kind of like the cool Jews, because like if you're Orthodox, you can't, it's like you can't really hang out with the cool Jews because it's usher, and although a lot of times like the circles kind of intermix like that. So I mean, generally, most of the converts I know enjoy their experience. You might, like because I guess that they come to Jewish events, and they enjoy, like pilpul and talking about things and just meeting Jews. So like I would say in almost all circumstance, even like poor people in Israel or like Hasidim that had people who tried to become Hasidic and maybe were down on their luck, never really got their money together, or family generally had a pretty positive attitude, and just loved Judaism, loved being a Jew, loved being included. And there's a certain amount, like once you know how to act as a Jew, you could have rabbis or people who are suspicious of you, but like if you know how to go in and daven and do the mitzvahs, it doesn't really matter. Like people could think good or bad, you're just doing what Jews do, and even Jews who are full Jews are probably going through similar uh, social dilemmas, and then especially in the Reform community where it's somewhat like just joining a club. So if you're going like the downtown synagogue and you start coming there Friday nights and you really like coming there Friday nights, and then you take like a 6 weeks course on Judaism, learn a little Hebrew, and next thing you know you're a Jew, and to a certain extent, like that means something. Like taking a 6 week course, coming for a few months straight to a liberal synagogue, doing the Sabbath meal and prayers means something, and then actually having a rabbi say like this person's a Jew, whatever that means, but that you're saying that there's actually a congregation that likes you, that like there's actually a group of Jews somewhere that included you, even if it was some progressive hippie or whatever perversion of Judaism. There was still some group of Jews that decided to include you. uh yes, I'm pretty big tent in general, and it doesn't bother me. uh Although there's a lot of dynamics. We talked about the structure, the layers within Orthodoxy, and that's why I mentioned the difference once you have a kid in the system, that like just being an adult male who shows up at synagogue or is friends with businessmen, people in the community events, versus like an inner circle of the people that are with the women and the children, the ones that have to be protected. And so once you have a kid, Judaism has like a nobody gets left behind, especially Orthodox Judaism has a nobody gets left behind type mentality. So even if Luke Ford had a kid in the system and that kid was in school with the rest of the Jewish kids, even though Luke himself, even Luke as someone who officially went through a conversion process, there would probably be a nobody left that gets left behind if things weren't working out and he was considering, God forbid, going back on his conversion. there would probably be a lot of Jews who would like help you out. You're like, Luke, what's going on? Like, I want to help you be successful as a Jew, as opposed to your kid. Once your kid had, been educated at a Jewish school for a few years, and the rabbis had been like, no, this guy's a convert, his kid's a full Jew, he can go to the school. There would be a significant higher effort to keep your kid, within the system. And then even like, God forbid, if you went back on your conversion, that like it's a possibility that, if you didn't want your kid, that they would keep your kid Jewish within the system. And so the layers of the community, I don't know if you agree. I mean, you think the Jewish community invests a huge amount in the next generation. And so, I think just the status level, the Talmud itself says like a man without children is like a dead man. And so I think from a certain level like that, you have to look at it as like a convert. There's multiple steps, but getting your kids married off to Jews is usually the pinnacle of the success of being a convert. And then that hopefully you're eternally going to be with the Jewish people, that you had kids and your kids intermarried with Jews, and then your seed should eternally be with the seed of Jacob in whatever Judeo mythology, however you choose to look at it.
Yep, and Holly writes in the chat, now I know why certain Jews sought me out to be their attorney. They didn't want word to get out in their community. I've had Orthodox Jews consult with me on financial issues, and at the time I wondered, because there are just so many Jewish lawyers. But yeah, they want to probably preserve the private nature of the information. So there's a question in the chat. If you can't put up with the tasks and requirements that come with converting to Orthodox Judaism, why convert to begin with? Because Orthodox Judaism's relentless. Okay, it has a lot of demands on you, and while you're really fired up, it may not be so tough. But as the years go by, it may seem increasingly onerous. Also, there are all sorts of things that you think you can handle, but then as the years go by and the requirements start to take a toll on you, you may feel that you can't handle them. Also, many people convert to get married, and then when they divorce or separate or are widowed, then the whole raison d'etre for their conversion drops away, and often people drop out for that. And the chat also says people who convert usually have identity problems or general mental health problems. Yeah, I'd say they generally tend to be high in neuroticism. That people want to, generally speaking, get rid of an unwanted life and throw themselves into a new life thinking that that's going to take care of their problems. So yeah, I've had rabbis who run conversion courts say that 99.9% of would-be converts are mentally ill, and they turn away something like 999 out of 1,000. Anything there you want to comment on, David?
Yeah, I mean, pretty interesting. And a lot of times it's mystical. It's hard to know why a person wants to convert, and the process of wanting to become a Jew, to becoming a Jew, to getting past the board of rabbis, to being part of the Jewish community in a way that you start feeling like kind of the rest of the Jews, to understand what it means to be a Jew, and then even to plan on bringing kids into that community and having your lot together with that community, to change your life like that. And then like we're talking like Mark Shapiro, if you say because you believe it's true, well, most Jews themselves don't believe it's true, so you're gonna have a hard time within the Jewish community when you believe something's true that the Jews themselves don't even believe is true. And the social or the community aspects. And the important thing about a conversion, even a reform or conservative, it's a lifetime commitment. And in today's age, there's not really, like Luke mentions, the Anglos and the oaths and various trust or honesty factors in terms to citizenship. The concept of a lifetime commitment is largely completely foreign to American culture, maybe like immigration after 14 years. But generally people don't make lifetime commitments. And you could look at like, do you really know what you're getting into? you're converting to Judaism, you're making a lifetime commitment, and then over the years, you say like, okay, like I put on tefillin and daven chakras an hour every day for 10 years, but then do you really want to do it 50 years? You want do you enjoy putting on tefillin and davening chakras that you're going to do it every every day for the next 40 years? And a lot of times it could take a toll, and even like Sabbath observance. And that's why I'm saying, like, yeah, it could be that you would find a wife, convert, get your kids in the system, daven chakras every day for 10 years, keep Sabbath, all this stuff, and then at a certain point you would just lose a feel for it, and it's like, oh man, do I really want to go daven chakras again? Like, your Sabbath would just lose its feel. But at that point, your kids might already be in the system, and that's the way really most Orthodox Jews feel, like, because the system itself is designed like that. Is get them married young, have them kids, have their kids in the system, have so much vested that their kids maintain in the system that basically whether they want to do it or not, they have to keep on doing it. And even like a leniency if you're in the modern Orthodox world, or even now in the Hasidic world, where you could take a few years off, fry out and be a goy for a few years, and then come back and maybe even do that multiple times in your life, where you could be like a modern Orthodox Jew. And if you're a doctor or have a big business or something, where there might be a few years of your life where you're driving on Sabbath, and then next thing you know, you're not, and you're back in shul, and you're going to all the events in the community, and people are like, weren't you driving on Sabbath a few years ago? And be like, well, yeah, of course, whatever, the rap, like I got my heter, like whatever, Hashem will judge me. And if your kids are within the school, if it's a business in LA, like a lot of times you have to keep on moving your kids around school to school in there. But if you're from a larger community, that there's discretion. Everyone knows that within Judaism there's a lot of discretionary power. There's halakha, there's hard cut rules, and money makes a huge difference. I mean, me and Luke talked about that many episodes, and we could talk about it more, and certainly with conversion and other things. You see, like Ivanka Trump, money makes a huge deal, and rabbis have the power to make exceptions based on certain things. And it's not just always because because of money. There's a lot of times because they're really concerned about people, or they're looking at this person and the larger concerns of the community. It could even be that people like him, that he's a convert, but he started driving on Sabbath, but he's very popular in the Jewish community, or whatever reason that the rabbis would make some sort of utilitarian decision that this guy's good for the Jews. I know it doesn't look fair or consistent, but we looked into it, and he's good for the Jews. We're going to make an exception for him. And to a certain extent, if you believe in the rabbis, you believe in the exceptions they make for people.
And Dr. Laura Schlesinger, she converted to Judaism for her husband. She initially converted through the conservative movement. She wrote at least one book with her conservative rabbi. Then she converted Orthodox, and she was going before audiences of Jewish women, talking to them about the glories of being an observant Jew, and they gave her grief for it. And she eventually got so much grief from the Jews that she completely quit Judaism. So what percentage of converts to Orthodox Judaism just largely give it up, or totally give it up? Maybe something like 25%. I mean, I've had rabbis who do Orthodox conversions who say that after 5 years, it's something like 95, 99% in Los Angeles of converts to Orthodox Judaism are still publicly keeping the Sabbath. But other people tell me no, probably 25% or 50% give it up. But even Jews born Jewish, born into Orthodox Judaism, probably 25 to 50% of them give it up and walk away. Any thoughts, David?
Yeah, I mean, there's also a factor, like a lot of people convert to Judaism because they think good things are going to happen to them through converting to Judaism, versus the factor of anti-Semitism and the downsides of being a Jew, that a convert at a certain time may be like, oh crap, this might cost me my life. I thought I was going to marry someone and I was going to get in with all these rich people, and you think, oh crap, this really might have cost me my life becoming a Jew. And if you go through an Orthodox conversion and you've read the books, like you knew that before you went through an Orthodox conversion, that like, yeah, like you knew in some way that like, yeah, this might cost you your life. You knew that there's a lot, like Holocaust and large swaths of people with negative opinions about Jews, that when you were becoming a Jew, that you accepted that hatred would become upon you. So if you're prepared for that, so that's probably also likely like why psychological problems. I even joke like that myself. Like I used to be paranoid and think everyone was out to get me. Then I became a Jew, and now really everyone is out to get me. And like a Seinfeld, God forbid the converting for the jokes. But you're saying like, yeah, if you have a paranoid personality where it's like, I always thought everyone was out to get me. So like becoming a Jew, just like, okay, it's like, okay, like everyone was already out to get me. So now there's more people out to get me. And maybe you had some sort of, perspective that the downside of being a Jew was almost exciting to you. Like here, me and Luke, years later, we're still talking and dealing with anti-Semites. It's probably exciting to us. There was probably an aspect when we became Jews that was kind of exciting to us. And, so rabbis who deal with converts or community leaders who have an assessment of the Jewish role in larger society, the larger utility or what's best for the Jews, really could use converts and have a pretty good aspect of, Gentile Jewish relations. And to a certain egalitarian aspect, Judaism is just a culture behavior, and you could grow up not doing it and learning it. And so rabbis, converts are extremely useful for the teaching of Judaism, because people are just, I'm a Jew. There's not really a good Jew or a bad Jew. We're just Jews. And the rabbis say like, no, there is a good Jew. And this person who blatantly did not used to be a Jew is now acting in the way that we say a Jew should act. And therefore he's a convert. And so if you're a Jew who is not acting in that way, the convert is somewhat being held up to that standard. And it's even in the Gemara, like, the Gemara in Yevamos and Tosfos, converts cause big problems to the Jewish community, because you're saying like, you're not really a Jew, Luke. And you say, but what do you mean? Like, I was talking like Charles Moskowitz, like I mean, I at least did a liquid fast, like it's coming into Tinus Esther for Megillah. I don't know if Charles was fasting or not. And he's kind of like, like questioning, like, I'm an anti-Semite. It's like, I'm fasting for Judaism, and people are still calling me an anti-Semite. But the certain aspect that you have to hold that standard when Jews come up to you and be like, "Well, you're doing this stupid stuff." And he's like, "Because I'm a Jew." That you have to be able to deal with the Jews who reject their own religion, and so converts have an extremely difficult role, because converts usually aren't big scholars, and to kind of be a spokesman, and also said the social dynamic where people are just people, and at the end of the day, there's halacha in the rules, but people want the community to get ahead, so people like me or Luke will serve as a conduit for former yeshiva guys, Orthodox people, teaching them English, acclimating them into the business, secular world, and even secular Reform conservative converts. Oh, is my phone ringing? Yeah, I mean, we've covered these things quite a few times before. I'm not sure. So I don't think this court decision is really going to make much of a matter. Like, I mean, is it really going to give that much in the identity issue? I mean, you probably know a lot of Reform and conservative converts who, so to say, just weren't going to make the cut to Orthodoxy. And, like, I know a lot of Reform and conservative converts. And if, came down, there's like, I'm sorry, unless you do Orthodox, you're not going to make the cut. That, like 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100 of them, no, there's no way they're going to do Orthodox. It's going to be way too difficult to follow all of these rules. How much of a comfort, and it probably is somewhat of a comfort to them to say, like, no, I mean, you're including the right of return. You're saying, look, like, you went to the, so I think that's a good thing, actually.
Okay, so I got a question today, and I'll just relay the question to you and see what your response is to it. Luke, do you feel an instinctive enmity toward other streamers that you have to suppress? Is there an inherent zero-sum quality of the medium that creates adversarial relationships between people who would otherwise be allies? Any thoughts on that, David?
I'm only in the terms of drama for the sake of viewership. So if you kind of hype up drama with other streamers in order to make it more interesting, that could karmatically come back to bite, or just pure lush and horror. Just like I was bad mouthing some other streamer, and obviously, like people who listen to him are likely to hear it, and that's the kind of conflict that might be good for ratings in various aspects of media. But I mean, generally, I don't come into conflict. I don't have any problem with any other streamer. Like if the streamer starts doing well or bad, and when I was doing more of the blood sports, like Brundle getting more numbers, or like the troll armies, that I got more trolls disliking my videos than people actually watching my videos. Usually there's a karmatic reason for that, and where they're coming from. And a lot of times, like I didn't have to go on Adam Green, and if I hadn't been on Adam Green, like the GDL probably never would have made their way to my video. So like, no, I don't think I really have any problem with that. Or I'm pretty good at just minding my own business, relatively trying not to burn bridges, keep positive relations, and don't let jealousy bring me down. If I'm not trying to pick winners or losers. There might be people I thought were going to do really well, and maybe they didn't do so good. There might be people that I wanted to fail and ended up succeeding, and usually I'm pretty immune to just saying, like, I can't pick winners or losers like that.
Okay, great. Any final words for today, David?
No, thanks for talking. And I think this decision on conversion's probably a good thing, because there's a lot of pressure for converts, and converting to Orthodox Judaism is really extremely difficult, and it's probably good to have, like, to say, like, look, I mean, you convert Reform or conservative, you say, like, what does it mean to be a Jew? But like that means something, and Israel's not going to leave you out in the cold. So like, to me, I'm a Big Tent kind of guy, so I see that as a good thing. And maybe even Luke, to say he made the cut, he probably knew a lot of people who didn't make the cut that he thinks probably you wouldn't mind if they were included. So thanks for bringing me on to talk about it. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks, David. Good to catch up with you. Okay, so Donald McNeil, the New York Times reporter who was fired by the New York Times for using the N-word, not as a slur, but just in a discussion. Well, he's finally written his side of things. And the Lion Blogosphere Twitter account says, this is a great read, a blog post by the fired New York Times reporter. I highly recommend it. Mr. Donald McNeil seems like a guy who's grumpy and battle-scarred, who doesn't suffer people whom he considers fools, likes to tell what he perceives to be the truth when it would be wiser to say nothing. McNeil has the sensibilities of a liberal circuit 1980, doesn't grok the wokeness of 2020. As an old guy from a parole background, he's completely out of touch with the younger generation from elite backgrounds who now run the Times. I like the guy. I totally agree with how he panned the Trump administration in that news conference, and totally agree that you can't dress like a thug to a job interview and expect to get the job. We need more journalists like McNeil. There was once a time when if you thought of a typical journalist, you thought of someone like McNeil. But today, a journalist is someone with rich parents who graduated from an Ivy League school. And I'll play a little bit from a recording here. Is Clubhouse obsessed with wokeism? Apparently, Brett Weinstein went on, and here goes.
I completely was completely irritated from the topic. From
completely.
I was only here to learn, to grow, and try to.
It's the silent whites trying to pass for me.
Right. So, but I will say this. I will say this.
What were you trying to learn?
There were some solid people that had some solid points, and I will say, Lewis, you did attempt, and I will say Gwen, I forgot his name, he also attempted a few times as well.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you real quick, DeGero. I don't like the attempts. I don't like the halfway celebratories. You weren't there, and that's a problem. You guys, hold on. You guys barely getting it is killing us. So when you have these conversations, this title is Black Dialect, but you didn't have no black moderators. Then you had your brochure college pamphlet black nigga up here, and he probably wore that emblem. Stop playing with us. Like, this is really crazy. And then y'all tried to moderate me like I was gonna quiet down. Okay, be a good nigga now. No, bitch. Now the room's mine. What's wrong with you?
Jindu, PTR. You up here? Brooklyn,
where's Jindu? Hunter, yo, all my niggas raise your hand. Reparations, baby.
Yo,
Yo.
Y'all got her hand raised. Black people, raise your hands. Come on, black people.
I'm so proud of y'all.
Oh, Rashad, I'm sorry, baby, but I didn't know if you was gonna shoot me back down or
No,
what.
girl, no. I am so proud of y'all. Like, I came in this
no,
room
I'm very,
earlier.
I'm very, very. And the only
Yes.
reason I was in this room, the only reason I was in this room was to flex my fucking shit. The only reason I was in this room, the only reason, I can't.
Yo, why we talking over? Okay, Icon's just gonna go down. You with them now.
Bro, let me finish, please.
I'm gonna bring him back up. Go ahead, Dayo.
Dio,
Dayo,
yes.
sorry.
So I was in this room to flex my shit because I like to come into these rooms with people, and especially when it's like majority white people, because I like to listen, and then I like to use the language and the quote unquote education, and also accumulated with my life experience to come into these rooms and tell people to shut the fuck up, but in a way that's like quote unquote palatable for them, because I feel like it exercises my fucking muscles, because I haven't been to school for a minute, and you know these white people love to hear the words. These white people.
Wow, I wish I could have been on that wonderful clubhouse discussion. Okay, guys, please know I'm looking at a summary of Lorraine Minutie's paper here on voter fraud. Voter fraud is extremely rare. At the federal level, records show only 24 people were convicted of or pled guilty to illegal voting between 2002 and 2005. The available state-level evidence of voter fraud, culled from interviews, reviews of newspaper coverage, and court proceedings, is also negligible. The lack of evidence of voter fraud is not because of a failure to codify it. It's not as if the states have failed to detail the ways voters could corrupt elections. There are hundreds of examples drawn from state election codes and constitutions that illustrate the precision with which the states have criminalized voter and election fraud. We use the same standards for judging voter fraud crime rates as we do for other crimes. We must conclude that the lack of evidence of arrests, indictments, or convictions for any of the practices defined as voter fraud means very little fraud is being committed. Okay, that's Professor Lorraine Minutie. Right, Washington Post, Greg Sargent, left-wing columnist here. Headline, Trump's big CPAC lie unmasks a vile truth. Democrats ignore it at their peril. Trump's CPAC speech doubled down on the big lie that the election was stolen from him. Embedded in that big lie was an unintentional truth. It was revealed when Trump uncorked an extended riff, suggesting that GOP's future prospects depend on what he calls election reforms. By election reform, Trump means a redoubled commitment to making it harder to vote. We know this because he said so. He went on to declare that Democrats use the China virus as an excuse to make vote by mail easier. We can never let that happen again, Trump said. We need election integrity and election reform immediately. Republicans should be the party of honest elections. Trump lost because voting wasn't hard enough, and Republicans must push as forcefully as possible in the opposite direction, and this is urgent. Republicans are acting on this all across the country. New York Times reports on the extraordinary new barrage of efforts by GOP lawmakers to make voting harder in many states. These include sharp cuts to early voting, restricting vote by mail in numerous ways, and proposals to allow state legislatures to appoint presidential electors in defiance of the state's popular votes. And in numerous states, Republicans are gearing up to use this year's redrawing of electoral maps to entrench extreme gerrymanders. All right. Subject topic here. What do neo-Nazis, what have they inherited from the original Nazism? And this is a documentary by the German public broadcaster.